Hi there, and welcome to Gray Muzzle Geekery. I am your host, Dusty Red, and with me as always,
Dusty White.
And welcome to this week's episode for February 25th, 2019. So, we're going to start off with the news as usual. I thought I made a sound thing in there one day, but what do we got?
Box office, Alita, the Battle Angel, and How to Train Your Dragon 3 both top at $300 million.
$300 million.
I luckily got to see a pre-release of How to Train Your Dragon 3, and really well done. And then I also recently saw Alita, Battle Angel. Had no idea it was going to be that interesting of an action flick. Definitely go for the action. Do not go for the
plot and story and stuff? Okay.
But it was very well done. Also, Gremlins animated prequel series in the works.
Gremlins? Like from the 80s?
Yeah.
All right.
Animated prequel series in the works, in development with Warner Brothers, supposed to be rolling out in 2020.
2020 is not a date, so it's like the future of everything. So I have some gaming news here for Toe Jam and Earl, Back in the Groove, is supposed to release March 1st, which for anybody that owned a Sega Genesis will remember that nonsense. Not terribly much in gaming going on. There's a couple announcements coming up that we'll do for next week's episode. But we'll go into...
Obviously, week of the Oscars and being the Oscars winnings recently. Into the Spider-Verse won Best Animated Feature.
Ooh.
And Rami Malek won Best Actor for Bohemian Rhapsody.
I've become a new, recent fan of Rami Malek. He was great in the movie, but, I'm enjoying just his facial expressions. He always looks like he has a dirty joke, where he's got the little smirk on his face, he's about to say poop in a public place and looking to see. I seen a meme that summed it up best. It looked like he's trying to chew chips quietly.
I can respect that.
But I've come to really appreciate the guy in general. He's very, very humble, very soft-spoken, seems like a very... cool. He seems like someone that I wouldn't mind having a drink at a bar with.
Oh, absolutely.
Just sitting, have a couple drinks, just shooting the stuff about nothing important. He seemed to have his head on his shoulders, so props and cheers to Rami Malek.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, on the flip side of things, we do have to make a mention to Peter Tork, the guitarist of the Monkees, who recently passed away.
I am personally very sad by that. My mom was a huge Monkees fan. He was a fixture in my house. I watched the Monkees with my mom. My mom had the Monkees on her wall.
So your family grew up with the Monkey stuff?
Yes, very much so. My part of what I used to use as my sign-on, Dream Weaver, but part of that is from Dream Believer.
Okay.
So.
Admittedly, in my house, Monkees and Beatles were kind of poo-pooed upon, and it was always Elvis. It was always Elvis Presley, Elvis this, Elvis that. I grew up listening to Elvis, and that was what my parents influenced me, and that's what was huge in my life. And eventually, I got a little bit older and was able to listen to my own stuff. We could do we'll have to do a music episode in the future.
Speaking of Elvis, what did you do this past weekend?
Whoa. Let's focus on you on this. This is a very special podcast because we had a very, very interesting weekend. I need to preface with the fact of this podcast isn't made to be a, quote, furry podcast. However, we happened to go to a convention run by one of my dear friends who introduced me into LARPing and got me heavily into more geek type culture with the gaming and the Dungeons and Dragons and just gaming in general. He went the other route and became the chairman of a convention called FurSquared, which is run on the last weekend in February and takes place in just outside Milwaukee, which makes sense to get a hotel cheap in Wisconsin in February where nobody else is gonna be. That said, what was your take on, because we realize we're opening a can of worms here, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're talking about the furry culture for those who don't know about the furry culture. What is your short spit take on what furry is?
Honestly, it's just another supportive culture or community. A better word for it would be community. Based on enjoying a common hobby.
I mean,
that is very
vague.
All right.
Here's what a furry is. ultimately, at the end of the day, it is a group of people who have an interest in anthropomorphic creatures or
Personas.
Well, that's even a term that's you're going too big. You got to go brass tacks here. It is an interest in a lot of cartoons. It's an interest in anything anthropomorphic, which is the definition of that is anything. It could be animal. It could be a TV. It could be. I mean, technically, Transformers would be considered anthropomorphic because it's a truck that has human-like qualities. So that is the base root term anthropomorphic. A lot of it is gone into cartoons, and it's gone into, well, that's even if we go modern, you could go even past Aesop's Fable, where you have the fox outsmarting the crow, or the crow outsmarting the rabbit. Those are all human qualities and traits that we've bestowed upon creatures that don't have these.
Dusty dropping the historical facts up in here.
I'm a gray muzzle for a reason, damn it. Which obviously influences, like, I've been part of the community on and off for a number of years, which is why the term gray muzzle I like on a multitude of levels. It does fit the fact of we get an old dog, they start getting gray around the whiskers, and cats as well. A lot of animals get the gray around the face. I'm getting gray on my beard now. So, with that said, what was your take? What was your impression? This is your third convention?
This is my third convention in a year's time. My first one being FurSquared 2018. Mm-hmm. Overall, it is an amazing experience. Anybody that enjoys that kind of atmosphere would really enjoy the community, the culture. Again, super supportive. You don't see a lot of hate culture or anything like that. They're really just a great experience in going to it. Part of my step into it was last year's con of being more LARP centric or D&D heavy, mm-hmm. Dungeons and Dragons, more tabletopping, more gaming, geekery in general.
And that helps with the convention chairman. Again, is a LARPer and a D&D player and a role player, a gamer himself. So it made sense for him to do, for his 5th year, to do a Dungeons and Dragons style convention, to the point of all the convention swag had dragons on it and had very D&D theme to it. It made sense for him to want to bring that to the community as well, because there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of overlap in those cultures where you have furry communities that go into other subcultures, that go into other interests as well. Because from my experience, it's interesting for a lot of those who consider themselves or associate themselves with the furry community.
For adjacent
community. But even then, there's a rough patch of, unlike other conventions and other communities, that, like, we'll use Doctor Who. You're a Doctor Who fan. I'm a Star Wars fan. You even have your Trekkies out there. There's only so much you can talk about in the air quote fur culture, because a lot of it is made by the individual. It's all self-made. The character or the persona, or the term that they use is fursona, ha ha, wink wink, nudge nudge, but a lot of that is self-created. You're not going to see a t-shirt at Walmart or Target or insert your local chain here that has that character on there. Whereas Star Wars fans or Doctor Who fans, we can sit here for hours and argue why Return of the Jedi is absolute garbage, or why the TARDIS shouldn't be blue, or why a million things that we could gravitate to by an established genre that exists. We could be on the outside, look into it, and judge together. What makes it difficult about this particular community is a lot of its content is user created. A lot of its fans within it are also creators, be it through music, through art, which obviously the main medium is art, but there's a lot of musicians out there. There's a lot of podcasters, there's a lot of comedians, there's a lot of entertainers, there's a lot of variety in, and don't get me wrong, it's in a lot of other communities as well. In the LARP community, we have a lot of illustrators. I mean, even our icon for the Gray Muzzle Geekery was made by a LARPer as well. So you do have that. But I think the difference is you'll have your artists we'll use Star Trek. You'll have people do drawings and memes and make music and stuff, but they aren't as highlighted or spotlighted in the community, whereas with the furry community, they are more spotlighted and highlighted because it is from within. There's not a big executive that's like, let's do this, let's do that. I mean, I guess Disney would be the biggest perpetuator
of furry culture.
I mean, they have a talking mouse that... So it is interesting to see that there is a level of, once you walk up to somebody and go, hey, I like zebras. Cool. I like foxes. Once you're past that point...
Then you have to find other common...
Right. Whereas if I walk up to you and say, hey, I think episode 6 of Star Trek The Next Generation is the best, then you can smack me in the face and say, no, Picard was terrible, Kirk was better. And then we get into a huge argument based on outside creation, based on somebody else's creation. Where here, if I go, yeah, my fox is a rogue who likes to play a musical instrument, and you're like, cool, my zebra is a knight of the realm, then we go, okay, I guess we're done. Like, what else would we talk about? So that becomes a case of what other
I've always enjoyed how you've explained the culture, or when we get asked, what is this? Why do we, like, what is furry? And I've always enjoyed your interpretation of my reasoning is my parents sat me in front of a television on Saturday morning, and what did I grow up watching?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's been born in the 80s, even the 70s, grew up watching Fraggle Rock, grew up watching Ninja Turtles, Street Sharks, Biker Mice, Battletoads,
Tiny Toons, Animaniacs, Looney Tunes. All of that is what raised me as a kid as well. So when
Lion
people
King.
talk about, you're talking about majority of Disney movies. Anthropomorphic animals is my childhood.
Sure.
So watching somebody, it's not a big jump from, hey, I run in the woods and throw bird seeds and hit people with plumbing supplies. It's not a big logical leap for me to go, okay, so instead of going outside and running around and LARPing as this character that I can grow as, I can go to a hotel for 3 to 4 days, be this person or be this personality, and get to see other people being passionate about how they escape and their personalities. And that just happens to be because they've built this world for this persona or a person that they want to be as an anthropomorphic animal. Like, and you're going to always have your one-offs and your subculture within a culture.
Well, like anything else. And I think we're immediately touching on, which I guess I could go. So we can sit here and talk positivity all day. And I realize we're going to be walking on glass here a little bit, because we're going to have some listeners that obviously know the negative connotations. As someone who's still fairly new to this group and to putting more than your toe in at this point, you've been to 3 conventions in a year, so you got to see some of the variety where a little bit of numbers. We'll get into numbers later, but for FurSquared had how many attendees? Just attendees.
1,132.
So 1,132 attendees, whereas the Midwest Fur Fest, which is recently took the title of the world's largest furry convention, had 12,000 attendees.
I think so.
It was
roughly,
about 12,000.
yeah.
I have to look the exact number up, but it was about 12,000 attendees. So, a fraction. So you went to a convention twice that had a fraction, a 10% of Midwest Fur Fest attendance. So you've seen this. What are some of the negative things that you might have seen within this culture? Like, obviously you're fairly savvy on Twitter, so you see some of the stuff that pops up. But what do you see as someone who's gone to 3 conventions now as some of the negativity?
Some of the negativity.
Or one of the negative things.
One of the negative things I see is if you haven't got something or a niche that you are in, you are going to get ignored. I personally, and this is my personal aspect of it, I walked around with somebody like you who is known within the fandom or in the community, and if it wasn't directly you or you in suit, I was invisible.
Why do you feel you're invisible?
I don't know if it was because I'm a female and they're rare. They're not rare in the fandom, but I definitely don't fit the. I don't fit the box or the typical female furry. I felt like because I did not have a suit, there's a almost kind of I haven't figured out my niche yet.
Okay, and I will back on that. I have seen a lot of people having to reinforce on Twitter at least, but in social media, that's saying, hey, just because you don't have a suit doesn't mean that you're not in the fandom. I think one of the big negatives that you've seen from TV and media's portrayal of the community is obviously the famous NCI episode of them in was it Las Vegas?
CIS.
Oh, CIS. There it is.
CSI,
where they walk into a furry convention and everybody is in suit and everybody's groping up and touching on each other, and immediate negative portrayal of maybe 10% to 15% of your attendees are going to be in suit.
Correct.
Lately, it's gotten a little bit bigger. There's more suits in the fandom now just because you have more access to that information. Back in the day, you had one or two people that was really good at it and figured it out, and they kind of hoarded the secrets. And you can you can link in that to LARPing as well. I mean, I had a market on making my weapons for a little while. Nobody else knew how to make the kind of weapons and the swords that I've made. It was definitely different. Well, you had people now that post YouTube videos on, hey, this is how you make feet. Slippers and some foam and some fake fur. Hey, this is how you make a head. You even have some makers that are out there that make bases, that do a resin cast of a face.
Right.
And just sell the skeleton, I guess. I don't know, the skull of it.
I mean, I've seen it.
With the hinge and the jaw, and then separately sell eyes and teeth and claws and just sell the pieces to a potential maker.
It's very DIY now.
Yeah, and you'd be like, hey, here's your base. Now you just have to add some foam on it and add your fake fur, and it's your character. I just sold you the base. I made bases. Here you go. Which only further encourages those that don't have a niche in the community to go and make it. I mean, and this is something we talked about as well in terms of LARPing episodes that will come up soon, why I'm not a fan of latex weaponry.
Right. Where
it does take away of the do-it-yourself. Express yourself through this medium. If you can't draw, but you want to draw, then draw. You only get better by doing the thing. Again, we'll take ourselves here doing a podcast. Like, we're still new at this and we're going to improve, but it is something that I feel that I can do, so I'm going to do it.
Right.
So it is a lot of encouraging. Now,
and that was one of the positives.
I wanted to put a spin on that. Now, one of the negatives that I have personally seen that you get on a lot of the furry cases, why you see a lot of people poo-poo on the furry community and stuff, is they are one of the easiest communities to get a reaction from. They react really quickly in terms of, which is why you see a lot of negative thrown around, is all you have to do is say something and you will get 1,000 that want to put their piece in, get their 2 cents out there, want to say their thing, and they're just quick to react. You poke them and they scream. And if you are a professional poker, you want to poke something that screams. You want to poke something that, easy there, I see the face you're making. You want to poke at, you want to make, if you want to make fun of, take a drink for that one. If you want to make fun of something and get a reaction from it, like the last thing you want to do, even as a comedian, is make fun of something and not get an audience reaction.
Right.
You're not so much trying to get a reaction from the individual, but you're trying to get an action from the crowd as well. And unfortunately, in my experience, the furry community has a tendency of reacting with vitriol as soon as you poke at them or poke something that you like. And that is, obviously, it's still a minority. But from what I have seen over the years, you poke at them and they squint and they want to scream back at you, and they're not very good at just letting it go. Like, who cares what they say? They're irrelevant. This is what I'm interested in, and yeah, I am interested in this thing. I go to these conventions. I spend money for a hotel and for a bunch of swag. I have a martini glass sitting on my shelf with spades and diamonds, clubs and hearts in the shape of mice, because that is the swag. We get poker chips with a mouse face on there. Like, because this particular weekend was Las Vegas theme, which goes into the Elvis thing. Yes, I was in an Elvis costume for a Las Vegas themed convention. Eat my butt.
I spent several hours making a full-fledged Vegas showgirl headdress.
And we were able to track you by the feathers.
I may have been easily tracked, I will admit.
It looks fantastic. We'll be sure to throw some pictures up on the Twitter account as well. But but that is also talking about your flair and stuff. It is making. You took some of your LARPing skills and your other crafting skills to make this outfit.
And had fun doing it, and a better experience. And even just the year before, again, going back to it being D&D themed, I was able to run around as essentially my LARP character that I did create at one point that just happened to serve a purpose as a LARP D&D fur character. Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, the crossover isn't always.
No.
You're not always going to get because you will see furries that are into other genres. One of our friends is a big Star Trek nut. He actually has photos of him in his panda suit, and he's got pictures with the cast.
Red shirt, I think, or a blue shirt.
I think he's got multiple. I mean, he's got yellow, blue, red. He is a diehard Star Trek fan.
Correct.
To the level of a musician within a community wrote a song for him about Star Trek. Kind of for him.
Got it.
So he's a well-known Trekkie. He's got photos from conventions with a variety of Star Trek cast members. So fantastic to him that he's able to express a multitude of fandoms. And I guess that's like one of the big things that just kind of hit me now that I can't emphasize enough. If you like a thing like it, and if it crosses over into other genres, rock on.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you like Star Trek and LARPing and furry and baseball, come up with your own Klingon baseball sport. I don't know. Come up with your own things. Just enjoy things that you like.
Be passionate about it, and be passionate in a way that celebrates your hobby and gets other people excited about it. And I think that's my draw to the fandom is I've yet to find somebody that doesn't have a spark of passion and gets you involved, and you're like, I didn't know I would be excited about this thing. Guess what? I'm now excited about this thing. And I think what helped us, because to kind of transition into it, is here we were at this convention, and because we get passionate about LARPing, we were able to serve on a panel and be panelists for this opportunity to spread that passion to other people.
So that goes back into the geekery of the particular convention. I have had the fortune of being on a panel called Otherworldly Stories. Now, the concept of the Otherworldly Stories is to tell stories about LARPing, as again, the convention of this particular, the chairman of this particular convention is a longtime LARPer himself, and he thought, I want to go on a panel and tell other people about LARPing, about D&D, about all these other hobbies that he's interested in, but he wants to tell it in story mode. It's not something that works when you want to bog down the conversation with jargon. Not many people knows what it means when you scream dodge, or when you scream slay, or when you scream numbers at people. They don't get that. Nobody wants to hear about, hey, this is how awesome I am. I am Mr. Badass Sir Puppy Punter, Kitten Slayer 9000, the supervillain, and I'm going to do this. Nobody really cares about that. They want to hear the goof ups, the gaffes, the funny instances, the one-off stories of, so this guy licked whipped cream off of a bald guy's head on a dare type stories. Like those goofy, silly stories. So we got to be on this panel of Otherworldly Stories, which tells about LARP and stuff. But it seemed to work out to make a draw. To be like, hey, if you're ever interested in this kind of thing, if you want to expand into other geekdom cultures and other geekery that exists outside of this, we got stories to tell. Do you remember who was on the panel exactly?
This year's panel consisted of...
you and myself. Dusty and Dusty.
Yeah, Dusty and Dusty. Surprise guest by Dusty. Alkali.
The chairman of the
chairman
convention.
of the con. Boozy.
Boozy Barrister or Boozy Badger, which is another story I'll get into in a second.
And his lovely partner, QM.
Yes. Quotation marks, I think, is what Q goes by. And they are East Coast players. I know the Boozy Badger played a Nero event out east.
Correct.
I think he played Ravenholtz. I can't remember.
I want to say Fable.
Fable? Okay.
I think that's
no, that was QM. I think played Fable.
I think it's the same game that they went to.
Okay. My apologies to anybody out there. That is what I remember. But they played a little bit to give it a shot and found that was a
great community. They liked it.
Good experience.
Good experience.
They even brought their kids.
Correct.
Because one of their kids was old enough to play, and he still makes the joke to this day of like, maybe you could call me a bad parent, but they ran off with the kid ran off with a group and hung with that other group and learned skills. Some even can say that they learned illegal skills. They learned how to lockpick, and out there, it wasn't just a...
Hey, I learned how to lockpick.
Like, hey, I have this skill. I have a piece of paper that says, I learned lockpicks. Roll a D20 or a D10 or a D6, and you have an X% of picking the lock. No, here's some little metal tools. Actually pick the lock. I would be lying if I said that I didn't purchase my own lockpick set, and in times when I'm bored around the house, start picking a lock, because... you never know when it's handy.
The Otherworldly Stories is a great opportunity to at least get people that are interested in something that they don't necessarily have the ability to look up or know about. They hear these stories from this personality in the fandom that they like and they enjoy when he does tell stories. And
he's known for storytelling.
Yeah, and now you have these other people that he can... bring out the other stories that we told. Dusty set up a slideshow and was able to show pictures of just 20 years worth of costuming and friendships and moments, and we were able to draw off of those, and stories were told of, do you remember when this happened? And we're able to tell those stories in a way that a layman, for a lack of a better word, can understand.
And nobody wants to hear about stats and statistics.
Yeah.
It's boring.
But they have that moment of, wow, that would be really cool to have that moment and have that hero moment, as we like to call it. And they
even the oh shit moments could be a lot of fun.
But it is dispelling myths about LARP in general to a public that will be open-minded to be like, maybe I will go try that. And we were able to sit there and hand out flyers and be like, and that's the slogan, don't just do it, live it.
And I think another thing, too, that's dispelled is the reversal of, like, you see sometimes LARPers will get a negative rap of them being fighter jocks or stick jocks, we call them, people who just like to swing and don't get into story, don't get into role play, because there are a variety of live action games that are out there.
Right.
Some of them
you have your Belgarths, your SCAs, your
you have people that'll beat the snot out of each other in rattan weaponry and full armor, and then you have other LARP live action role playing games that are paper scissors rock.
Right.
For I'm gonna punch you, 1, 2, 3. Up, paper beats rock, so I punched you in the face, take damage. Not ragging on the White Wolf system, but it is a system.
The gateway LARP.
I mean, that's what got me into it.
Yeah.
I started White Wolf in 98 or 99. A friend of mine his name was Dustin. That gives you an idea of where I learned. I really liked the name Dusty. I used to go by Sid. Was my first name that I used was Sid because I was a huge fan of Final Fantasy. And if anybody played any Final Fantasy, know that there's a Sid in every game. I think almost every game. Various incarnations of him, but always Sid. So I went by Sid. Sid Foxtails, to be exact. Shut up. I was edgy teenager.
Consistent.
I was an edgy teenager.
You stayed consistent. Take a drink.
Edgy teenager drinks. Anybody listening who can, if you're at the office, I mean, I'm sure you got the flask hidden in the drawer. If you don't, you get a better office. Speaking of which, we could go into Dungeons and Dragons with one of our friends who goes by the name of Skylar Ringtail, who did a competitive Dungeons and Dragons module. Now, I did not know what he was talking about when he told me privately, hey, I'm going to do competitive D&D. And I'm like, well, admittedly, every time I've played D&D with my friends, it ended up competitive in some way. Please explain. And so what he ended up doing is he designed a module based on the concept of the casino weekend.
Correct.
The goal of the module was that you are a group that was tasked to infiltrate a Dungeons and Dragons medieval-style casino and to rob its prized possession or a specific item.
It's essentially Ocean's 11.
Yeah, it was Ocean's 11. You had to go in, rob this item, and escape. Now, where does it get competitive? he had pre-generated characters. He had 8,
which was super helpful for somebody like me.
And not only that, pre-generated characters, he had really short mock-ups of this is a character, this is their gender, their race,
history.
their class, and a short description of kind of personality and their motive and possible history with other members in the party. And it was really short, and it was made to hand out. So he handed all of that to the 6 of us. Obviously, he had 8 characters, so the 6 of us had to choose. We actually didn't choose a rogue.
Yeah.
Our whole group did not have a rogue. And so once we got to pick our characters, then he handed us the actual generated character sheet, which was fantastic.
Well done.
It made new players to D&D not feel overwhelmed by getting handed a character sheet and going,
and then a book.
Here's all your stats. Here's an idea of what you can do. Now here's the stats to do it. So that was super fantastic. It was really easy to pick up. Then he ran the campaign. You had a 3-hour timer and went 3, 2, 1, go. Read all the descriptions, read everything as he went. We went through the module, stole the item, and then escaped. And we got points based on who all survived. Like if the whole party got out, you got points based on that. You got points on if you wounded or killed any of the guards that were watching, which is also cool. It's Ocean's 11. It's not kick the door down, burn the casino to the ground.
Be loud, abrasive. The louder you were, the more brash you were with your actions, the less points you got. The less points you got.
It's a theft. And also the fact that he even announced at the beginning, like, hey, if you make too much of a ruckus, I can't sell this item on the black market for as much because it's being sought after. Whereas if it's hush-hush and a sneaky job, I could pawn it off easier. People aren't looking for it compared to other things. So he did a really good job with that. Obviously, there was other things of if guards were alerted, if anybody was killed, how much additional stuff was stolen. Because I know me personally.
Correct.
I played as the bard, surprise, strum, and needed to be a distraction. And my goal was to distract as many guards on the main floor as possible. Well, once things kind of went sideways,
as they tend to do,
all the guards started scurrying towards the main vault to go deal with that. So I just sauntered out the front door, pocketing extra gold and coins and chips and everything else, which added to our final score.
Correct. Sadly, I was the blood sacrifice for the group to succeed overall, which I'm always happy to do.
In fairness, it would have been good if you would have got that hold person spell off.
Correct.
You rolled poorly. They rolled a high defensive and turned around and went, nope, and chopped you down. We were all 3rd level.
Yeah.
So it was also good enough because for those who are wondering, it was Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So at 3rd level, you're good enough to start having some abilities, but not so strong where you could just start blinking it out of existence and making things completely invisible and other crazy nonsense powers because anybody's played D&D at a higher level.
And I would give credit to Skylar for the fact of he did run it well enough that, yes, it's not going to go 100% smoothly. It is set up to have pitfalls and traps. And
we came close.
We did. And we were the last session on Sunday, and we ended up knowing that we had enough points at the end to
take some risks.
Sure. So overall, it was a good experience, and I would definitely... Anybody that's hesitant to do it in the future, if you get an opportunity to just do even at a Gen Con, any type of convention that would offer this, go sit down, go sit and meet with people and run a 3-hour session and get a feel. It was a great experience, great memories.
And I will notice the commonality between a lot of Dungeon Masters that they will pare it down to a level of simplicity and then give you your sheets and give you your information and go, hey, here you go. Like, I've simplified it enough so this is all you need to do, and then you can go from there. Because once you get that first session out of the way and you get familiar with your roles, you get familiar with stats, and you kind of put 2 and 2 together, the game gets infinitely easier. It's one of those easy to play but hard to master situations because... Yeah, okay, here's your rules, here's your this and this. But then you start getting creative. And you start, especially for a spellcaster or a mage or anything, then you start thinking outside the box of, oh, I can do a thing. Can I do this? And you get a devious look in you get the Rami Malek face of like, can I walk through this wall? And like, okay, but you're on a a tower that's a mile in the sky, sure, walk through the wall. Like,
Right.
you will have that play. So a lot of good dungeon masters and a lot of good storytellers will set you up for success in your early, especially in short 3-hour bursts. They will try to introduce you to not an overwhelming amount, but enough to get you excited and psyched for, wow, that was fun.
And that's what I watched Phelan do when I sat there.
Oh, Phelan, we will give a shout out to another event that happened, was called the Charity D&D. Now, the Charity D&D was a session that a friend of mine, Phelan, he goes by the name Phelan. So my friend Phelan ran an event called the Charity Dungeons & Dragons panel. And what he did there is he got a couple people from the fur community, the furry community, and fur adjacent. Our friend John Beardo the Magnificent is not a furry, he goes by a human, but he is also good friends with a lot of furries, and he helps run the convention and is a really solid, stable guy that goes, hey, what needs to get done, this gets done. Props to John for everything he's done and everything he continues to do within a community that I don't want to say isn't his own, but for as little interest that he puts into the community, or at least he portrays that he's not interested, he is a huge factor in making sure that everybody feels safe and welcome, that he is a super caring guy. And I'm giving a shout out to my friend John here, shamelessly. He is a really cool dude that if you have the opportunity to run into him, like, he's one of those guys you could buy a drink and he will just a really cool dude. So anyway, he was helping run all this. He was one of the panelists, as well as the con chairman, Alkali, who was also one of the other panelists. The new con chairman for 2020 FurSquared, he goes by the name of Dragor, was also on there sitting next to me, that I was one of the special guests as well, which again, I am still humbled and honored that people would come and watch us play Dungeons and Dragons. And yeah, it was a session where he ran a campaign. It was a module. It was just a short module that was based off of charity donations. And every milestone that was reached at $200, at $400, a thing happened to us.
On top of if guests were able to give a larger chunk of money
I think
donation,
it was $50.
you get a favor.
We got a favor. So the first favor would be somebody went up and went, hey, we're donating to charity, so here's $50. And a favor happened to us, one of which was we got all of our gear. Like, it was locked away, and we had to, one of the first things we had to do in this dungeon was get our gear. And because if somebody put the $50 right up, we were able to access our gear easier. Then another 50 came in, and our gear turned magical. And so it was little things like that you're able to alter die rolls I've seen as well, where,
Correct.
hey, here's 50 oh, crap, I rolled a 1, critical fail. Somebody
Favor.
throws a $20 down, re-roll that one. So it's
a good give and take, masochistic, because you do kind of want to see the party have problems and
sure.
struggle a bit, which Fallon did very good on riding that line.
And I think the big thing that, again, I'm still humbled by is that he made a plan for up to $1,000. At $1,000, the big bad would happen, the big negative, the encounter would happen. The problem is that money was still coming in. It's a good problem to have. And he had to come up with
every time that hat was passed, it was gathering more and more charity.
What she meant by that is the convention chairman is known for walking around with a giant top hat. It kind of became
a thing.
It became like Frosty the Snowman.
Right.
Like you put Frosty's hat on, and thankfully to the guy who wears it, Alkali who wears it, it's also kind of a mental like costume piece for him. He knows that when he's wearing that top hat, he is in performance. He is in performance mode. He needs to perform. He needs to entertain. That is the character that he becomes. It's like putting on makeup. It's like putting on. If anybody's ever played D&D, you put on your cape or your special shirt or something to get you in that mood. Maybe you listen to a CD to get you in that headspace of, I am Zoc the Barbarian. I'm going to get myself in headspace listening to Rammstein. I'm ready to kill some stuff. He gets into his character mode by putting on his top hat, and he becomes the performer. He becomes the entertainer. The flip side of that is he then passes that top hat around.
Anybody that's gone to the Renaissance Fair or something at the end of the performance.
Oh, shout out to Mooney.
But yeah, of course. Give if you can. If you can't, that's fine. They're still there to perform. Thank you for being here. You're giving me an audience to perform for.
Money is nice. Your time is invaluable.
So every time that hat was passed, I watched and saw the meter, and it's definitely like, given to the kids for muscular dystrophy. Right. You see the meter go up and up and up.
What was the convention for this year at FurSquared?
It was H.A.W.S,
which is the Humane Animal Welfare Society. So when you're in a room full of animal people and a convention full of people who support animals and love puppies and kitties, and ultimately that's what it is. I mean, obviously they have some
other smaller animals.
Well, they have some affiliation toward these creatures. Like,
right.
I grew up with dogs, and I know you have a dog. You have a rescue, if I'm not mistaken.
I do.
So
house full of rescues.
So we have a house full of rescues. So we have these interests in these animals. So it only makes sense for the charity to be focused on animal rescue and animal welfare and such. So yeah, so FurSquared was raising money for the Animal Welfare Society, this one in particular of Milwaukee. And so they passed a hat and raised money and surpassed his initial goal of $1,000 to the point where they ended up raising
$1,200, I believe.
It was $1,200 they managed to raise for a Saturday morning, 11 a.m. after drinking all night. Like, I went in pajamas.
You did.
I went in pajamas. No shame. Like, I've been drinking all night, and now I have to go play D&D. And a bunch of people threw money at us to entertain, but to also raise money for H.A.W.S. So it gives you an idea of the community, of the furry fandom, of where the heart is. Wherever you see all the vitriol and all the other nonsense that shows up on Twitter or social media or all the negative backlash, you do negativity. If anybody ever worked at retail, you know full well that negative comments get seen and heard far more often than the positive. For every 100 positive things,
on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 through 9 are always zeros.
Fair.
It's not until you get a
hit
10.
The 10. Yeah, I hated that. Unless you got 10s across the board, you did something wrong. And unfortunately, you get that with a lot of the fandom and a lot of other communities as well. I mean, LARPers get that nonsense as well of, they worship demons in the woods and they do this and this. Is like, no. We're a supportive community. We help people get out of their heads. I like it because I get to go and run around outside. I mean, even this convention, I was disconnected from most of the world for the weekend, which explains the tardiness of this particular episode of the podcast, because I was disconnected from the world. My phone was mostly off. I took pictures and I got to look up some things if needed, but for the most part, I got to sit around, have a couple drinks.
Listen to great music.
Great music, great stories from other storytellers in the community. I guess that's one of the things that people forget that I've noticed in the community, of not only the charity aspects. Actually, let's do the numbers there. So you have I see you have a list of numbers in front of you.
We do have numbers, but before we get to those, I would like to discuss about the fact of a little bit of dissuading some of the myths about the culture and the community. Okay. Is there's some pop culture references, as we've already mentioned recently, and things like that furries are alone in their dark, living with their moms, not productive members of society. I literally stood and was in presence of a NASA rocket scientist, a PhD chemist, multiple programmers, multiple highly professional individuals. I read an article recently that said an average fursuit costs close to $2,000, and that's just
that'd be even the low end of average,
right? And I stood in one location at one point this past weekend and literally saw close to $600,000 walk by me.
So what was the number of fursuiters?
There was 293 fursuiters that walked the parade. Okay. So that means at that one point there was 293 people in one location, walked a parade, and on average, a fursuit costs close to $2,000. Sure. And that is something that I take in awe.
Well, and thinking on it right now of not only just the dollar amount, how many hours do you think it takes per suit to be made?
Which is why they do run on the high end of stuff, because it is.
But how many hours?
But some of these are walking pieces of art.
100%. Not some, all of them. Every single suit that walks by is a walking piece of art. Everything that was handcrafted and made. And look, art doesn't have to be good. Like,
but
art is subjective.
Correct.
So you could have some suits that may not look great. But for all you know, that could be that person's first time making a suit.
And the love and commitment, or the
to finish it.
To finish it and wear it with
progress,
pride.
not progress, progress, not perfection.
Correct.
And you could have a situation of somebody putting it together and getting it done, but then using those lessons to make another one, or to make another project of some sort that lets them expand on their interests or their hobbies. Maybe they don't like making these suits anymore. Maybe they like working with leather. Right. And all of a sudden they become leather workers, or they become somebody that works with chainmail. Or, I mean, in my case, I'm segueing a little bit, but in my case, I did not realize that I enjoyed working with my hands until I turned 30.
Right.
I knew I was better with my hands. I was never a really good student in school. I was never good at that. But it wasn't until I started making things and working on things with my hand, very tactile individual, that my uncle was like, why don't you go to a trade school? Like, you're good with your hands. You know how to make things. You're good with measurements. And it sounds silly, like, oh, you could read numbers. But you put those numbers in you're able to visualize. You're able to visualize what 12 inches is. Wink, wink.
Drink.
But if you're able to visualize, 3D stuff, or be able to visualize things and work with it to make it happen, be it clay, be it with foam, be it through weaponry, through anything else, maybe those kinds of trades are for you. And so for me, specifically, working with making LARPing foam weaponry, making costumes, I found myself good with my hands. I am better with my hands than I am just getting a lecture or being a student.
Sitting at a computer, or I totally get it.
So I go to a trade school and become Dean's List. Right. Someone who was terrible in high school and college, and all of a sudden I'm a Dean's List at a trade school for electrical work. Was working with my hands. I found my niche. So it's good for these people to have that outlet to work with their hands and to work in different forms of medium. I mean, one of our friends got involved in the iron fursuit competition.
Oh, right.
It was a literal competition where we're going to break everybody into teams, and then we're going to drop a load of supplies, like kindergarten supplies, a bag of felt and pipe cleaner and all sorts of stuff, and you have 1 hour to make your own, air quote, fursuit. And a couple of our friends went thinking that it was just going to be
and let's watch these people do it.
Let's watch these people make it.
And they ended up
making it.
Doing it. Not only it ended up in the team that made it, also ended up winning it.
Winning the competition. And they made a rabbit. They were able to make a rabbit, and it did not look bad at all. It was a cardboard head base, everything else, but it's funny when one of our friends...
A stiff wind is going to take it out, but...
One of our friends that goes by the name of Whisper went, I was not expecting that, and I probably wouldn't have done it knowing what it was, but now that I did it, it was more fun than I thought.
Right.
So that's what the community focuses on. Do, not just watch.
So circling back to our numbers. Along with Dustin's performance for the charity D&D, just breaking it down, overall there was over 95 staff to run and function this convention.
To give you an idea, if you want to, how many total attendees we said again? 1,000?
1,000, correct it from earlier, it was 1,120 people.
1,120 people, 95 of them
were staff.
So it gives you an idea that it takes some wrangling for this kind of stuff.
They had things like Rocket League competitions, Smash Brother tournament, dance competitions. There was 93 panelists, 2 of us included. Yep. Artimis, which is a amazing game if you ever get the opportunity to play.
I've never played Artimis. If you're a Star Trek fan, Artimis is basically a spaceship bridge simulator. Everybody has their own screen, and you're limited to your screen. You are communications, you are science, you are weaponry. That is all you do, but then you have your captain that tells you what to do. Hey, Helm, your pilot, take us to this direction. weapons guy, get ready to fire upon anybody else. Hey, science guy, I need you to scan these sectors.
Bill.
Nice. Yeah, Bill, the science guy, I need you to go and scan this area to see if there's anything there in terms of resources or minerals or enemies that we may come across. Hey, communications, go tell these other space stations to either build a thing or that they need to get prepared for our boarding or our docking.
Stop playing blackjack.
There. So you have, it is a really cool game to look up where it is a full team game. All 6 players have to pilot this ship one section at a time. And it is also a game of communication where if you're just shouting stuff, it doesn't help. But in terms of team building, you do the call and answer of, Captain, this space station is ready for our boarding. Got it? And then the captain will go, understood. Hey, Helm, yes, Captain. How do we get to this location? It is very much Star Trek and has that vibe to it. And I highly suggest that if anybody is interested in this, to play at a convention if it's there, and if not, purchase it. It's like $5 or $10 for the game.
Right.
And one key, if you're doing it through a computer, then one CD key is plenty. You could share that CD key amongst other PCs. But you could also do it to a mobile device, which I think is $5. It's absolutely worth it. So that's my shameless plug for this game. I've been playing it for a couple years. It's stupid fun.
So roughly 10,372 hours of the con from Thursday evening all the way till Sunday evening. Mm-hmm. Parade count, again, 293 fursuiters. In total, with super sponsors and sponsors, 425 people gave additional money on top of buying a badge.
Right, you had your badge attendees, which was like $50, give or take.
Roughly.
And then you had people who threw down extra, which went not only to charity, but went back to the convention to get your con swag. Again, some of the convention swag was posters, was T-shirts, poker
shot
chips, shot glasses. I've got a martini glass.
Yeah.
Little chocolate candies that had
pens, notebooks.
The pins were really nice. It was a spade of a mouse. So they will take, so the sponsors and super sponsors also help bring in the extra funds to also buy equipment, to upgrade speakers, to upgrade microphones, to upgrade...
To keep the con operating.
Yeah, operational, sure.
There was 425 of those. For registered for 2019, there was 1,120 people. Whew. They raised, in money alone, $16,140. Now, part of that additional money was given in chips. And one individual had been littering these poker chips through the whole weekend. Nobody understood what they were. Right. Alkali, as the con chairman, would end up with these poker chips in his hat and did not understand. At the end of the ceremony, at closing ceremonies, that individual said, I gave out this amount of chips, equaling to an additional $3,000.
Right. And he donated $3,000 to the convention as well.
Now, H.A.W.S, going back a little bit to talk about H.A.W.S, and they did have one of their representatives, the head of their...
They had three, actually. They had 3 representatives of the Milwaukee H.A.W.S. That's the other thing about it is H.A.W.S was there with a table set up to take donations directly, and they were adopting out animals. In fact, one of our musical friends ended up adopting a guinea pig.
Yeah. So this allows them to become an absolute, and anybody that's done any type of volunteering with a shelter at any point or understands the life of a shelter, they are a no-kill open enrollment shelter. Yep. Meaning any animal that is brought or shows up at that door is protected. It's taken in and is not, there is no chance of them being terminated or transferred. One individual fursuiter, and it brought me to tears. It brought several of the people around me to tears.
I'm dead inside. We get that.
She, the year before, said that her parents' house was selling.
Right. And
she was going to donate a percentage of her parents' house selling to the con. Well, the whole house sold, and she donated in cash. I mean, I saw a physical stack of cash of $10,200 handed directly to
the
Alkali, the
Yep.
con chairman. So overall, over 4 days worth of having fun, getting to hang out with your friends, getting to see panelists and music and comedy and just overall great fun and an escape for 4 days. You also had these individuals roughly give close to $30 a person and equate and hand over to H.A.W.S $32,182.55.
It's mind-blowing, really. It's humbling to be a part of it as well. Like, as somebody who... I'm a novice at entertainment. I'm a novice at this kind of thing, to try to entertain and be entertaining and to have fun doing stuff. But to see other people donate and to see people open up their wallets, but to open up their hearts. And again, the one renewable resource I always argue is time is one of our few non-renewable resources. Time wasted is time forever lost. And for people to want to donate their time to come and see us and come spend time with us, and then obviously spend money to encourage this kind of charity and environment is really, really humbling. So obviously we are biased in that regard, having come off of such a great weekend, to be in an Elvis costume, to have a Vegas style theme, to continue to dance other realms of geekery, from Dungeons and Dragons, from Artimis, which is your Star Trek simulator. I don't want to say Star Trek, but it is a spaceship simulator, but it has a very Star Trek vibe to it because everybody has a designated role on that starship. To musicians, there was one of the guests of honor who goes by the name of Iggy. He is a gamesman as well as a connoisseur, I guess you could say, of musicals and other such things. And
I have never seen a man walk into a room and without any music do Music Man.
Yeah, he went up and straight up did the Music Man. Like, right out the gate, started it off. It was Iggy's musical cacophony. A cavalcade of musical cacophony. That's what it was. And got a bunch of people who are, I can't say terribly known in the community, but got a bunch of people to step out of their skin and perform various songs. We had one guy go up there and do a song from Avenue Q. Mm-hmm. It was rather adorable how nervous he was, and he was shaking, and just once he started to sing,
end of it, it was fine.
Punching through. He punched
amazing.
Through it. We had somebody do the other side from The Greatest Showman, which, again, nervous, but as soon as that groove was found, he went from standing there with the microphone rigid to starting to do some hand gestures, to at the end where he's like, they're doing the deal. He's shaking off the deal and shaking his hand and like really getting into as if what's the actor's name now? I can't think of his name.
Zac Efron?
Yeah, Zac Efron.
Jackman?
No, I almost said Jude Law. I don't know why. Zac Efron and
That's
Jude
why
Law
you leave that to me.
Yeah, I'm bad at that. I have seen The Greatest Showman more than once, though,
True.
which is strange for me to see any movie more than once, other than Emperor's New Groove. So it was just cool to see these people kind of come out of their skin. And again, that negative stereotype that exists of a lot of people that are a little bit more introverted and a little bit quieter, to encourage it. Hey, step out. You have skills. You have abilities. Go and do things. So
it was fun to watch. That was one of my suggestions for the day. I was really glad that I did go and see that.
It was fun.
And it was just not something I expected. And at the end of it, it was fantastic. But yeah, for 4 days worth of entertainment, interactions with people that, again, are passionate about their hobbies and get other people passionate, it was great to end it with something so spectacular of being able to hand over to a
worthwhile charity.
A worthwhile charity, such a large amount of money that they are able to function. Again, open enrollment, no kill. That's
pretty impressive. Yeah, all in all, I had a great weekend. I mean, I'm looking forward to the next couple conventions. Again, I can't emphasize enough, even though this is a podcast run by furries, I guess you could say. We're not trying to be a furry podcast, but I did want to do this particular episode to kind of talk about what the community is and how it does have a lot of overlap with Geekery.
Yeah.
On how not only is it its own entity of geekitude on its own, but has a lot of people crossing over into other geek cultures, which I guess recently, in recent years, has opened its doors where, again, you see a lot of the Star Trek versus Star Wars fights. You don't see that anymore. Nobody cares about that. You see a lot of the fights of, furries on the bottom tier of the geek, of the nerd subculture. They're still there, admittedly, because obviously you're going to have your strays that just dip into other realms of the fandom that are adjacent. I mean, obviously the sexual deviancy that is known within the fandom has a tendency of getting brought up, but obviously the argument and counter is, what Star Wars fan hasn't had, or at least fantasized about a girl in the Princess Leia getup? Like,
every culture has its subculture.
Has its not even subculture, but have its deviance within. The problem is that those deviancies have a tendency of being highlighted. So there's a point of us having to fight back and go, that's not who we are. That's not what we do.
I agree.
So at the end of it, I mean, it was a great weekend. It was a good time. We will be bringing more. There's a couple more conventions on my plate specifically that I was asked to attend to do more geek-type culture, to talk about live-action roleplay, to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, to talk about some music stuff that's coming up from a couple of our music friends.
Right.
I don't know. That's
what's on the docket.
That's on the docket. Be prepared for those convention stories that will happen, our own convention horror stories, so to speak. And yeah, do you have anything else you want to wrap up with, or?
Next couple of weeks will be, I think the next thing on our list is a LARP weekend.
We will be having a LARP weekend, and that may be a special car ride podcast where we will do a podcast from either our phone or from some setup, if I get a laptop set up, from our vehicle going to the event, because we will be going from just outside Chicago.
Right.
Chicagoland area, which is basically Gary to Madison.
Whoa, Chicago person.
Hey, we dominate it all. Once you go south of I-80, here be dragons, all right? And we will be driving 4.5 hours from the Chicagoland area toward Detroit to go play in a live-action game out that way. So I think on the docket for that, we will do a recording of the car ride there or the car ride back, talking about the game and talking about LARP. So this is a very furry-heavy episode.
Stay with us.
We will be doing a very LARPy-heavy episode soon. And in between that, we'll smatter it up with your generic geekery.
As always, if you have any questions, concerns, suggestions, feel free to reach out to us. We have several different ways. We're looking forward to getting some of that and discussing with you guys as our listeners.
So with that, I will bid you adieu. I am Dusty Red.
And as always, Dusty White.
And as always, just because we know a little bit more doesn't mean we know any better. Have a good night. Thank you for listening to another episode of Gray Muzzle Geekery with Dusty Red and Dusty White. You can send your questions and comments to us at graymuzzlegeekery@gmail.com or find us on Twitter at graymuzzlegeek. We can be found on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and Buzzsprout. A special thank you to Pepper Coyote for our intro theme, and if you like what you heard, find more of his stuff on Spotify, Patreon, or purchase it directly from his BandCamp page.